In this video, I would introduce you to the data analysis process. Now, as a data analyst, there is a process you need to go through to complete the data analytics task, right? So the very first step in the data analysis process is gathering data. Before you start out, analyzing your data, cleaning your data, or doing whatever you want with your data, you have to have the data. So like I said, the very first step is gathering your data. So data lives in a variety of sources. Your data could be on the internet. Your data might have to be gathered manually. You might need to conduct a survey or share questionnaires or hold interviews to gather your data. Your data could be on a website, like I said. Your data could be in a database. You might need to even access an API to get the data. So data lives in a variety of sources. But before you can, conclude the data analysis process, the very first thing you need to do is get your data from the source. Now, after you've gathered your data, the next step is cleaning your data. So it is speculated that a data analyst spends 80% of their time cleaning data. This appears like the task that would take most of your time as a data analyst because data is mostly unclean. So what do I mean by unclean data? Unclean data is data that has issues, whether structural issue or content issue. So for instance, if you have missing values in your data, it is regarded as unclean. So let me use this as an example. Let's look at this data here. This data is not totally clean. There are a couple of issues with this data, right? So for instance, the very first issue is in this column. You can see that someone's age is 350, which is impossible. So this is an example of an unclean data. This is an incorrect value, right? Look at this column here. You can see that the issue here is inconsistency. For instance, some countries were typed out as USA while some were typed out as United States. This is inconsistent. This is another example of an unclean data. Also, this is incorrect value, male. So probably the person was trying to spell male and then it spelled it incorrectly. This is another example of an unclean data. Here is also a missing data. It is missing. There's nothing there. That is another example of unclean data. So before you proceed to analyzing your data, you need to clean your data. Cleaning your data means fixing all of those structural and content issues. So you need to correct the incorrect values, fill up the missing values, make consistent the inconsistent values, and basically ensure that the data is suitable for analysis. And this is a very tasking process because it takes a lot of time. The data we have here is very small. There are about 5 observations, but in a real business scenario, you usually have thousands and millions of observations. So you can imagine how long it will take to clean the data. However, there are ways you can clean everything automatically. There are automated steps and functions you can use instead of manually doing it one by one. But you can get the big picture about how tasking or how long it will take for you to clean your data. So this is an example of an unclean data. If you proceed to analyzing your data like this, say for instance you wanted to get the average age of your student, right? Without cleaning the data, your insight will be incorrect. So for instance, I can say that the average age of my student is 91, which is not correct because of this incorrect value. But if I had cleaned the data first, so say I changed this to 30 instead of 35, and then I try to get the average age, I can now tell that the average age of my student is 28, which is correct. So if you proceed to analyzing your data before cleaning it, you're going to arrive at incorrect conclusions and incorrect insights, and then you use these incorrect insights to make business decisions which might be detrimental to the health of the business. So you need to clean your data. Spend time cleaning your data. After you've cleaned your data, you can now proceed to analyzing your data. So this is a brief analysis that I did. I cleaned the data, I changed it to 35. After I changed it, I found the average of the ages, which was 28. I've analyzed my data. So after you clean your data, you analyze your data, but you don't just stop at analyzing your data. So the reason is a lot of studies has been done, and it has been concluded that the best way to communicate your insight is through visuals. So after you've cleaned your data and then you analyze your data and then you get some insight or some trends or anything that you notice from analyzing your data, when you're going to communicate this insights to the stakeholders, that's probably your manager or the investors or your CEO or whoever you report to, it is advisable that you communicate these insights to them via charts and graphs and maps, basically visuals, instead of just using numbers and figures. So after you've analyzed your data, you have to visualize it. So say for instance, my manager asked me, how many students do we have from each country? Firstly, I have to clean this data, I have to make it consistent. This is USA, this is USA. So this also has to be consistent. So I can change this to USA. And then let's say I want to proceed to getting how many students I have from each country, right? So let's say I just do some quick analysis. You might not understand this now, but with time you will. So I probably want to see how many students I have from each country. So I'm just doing a quick analysis to find how many students I have from each country. In Nigeria, I can say I have 1 student. In UK, 1 student. In USA, 3 students. So if I'm going to communicate these insights to my manager, it is advisable that instead of just taking this chart here and showing it to my manager, it's advisable that I show it to him in form of a visual. So let me just lay this out properly. So instead of showing my manager this table here and just telling him, oh, we have 1 student from Nigeria, 1 student from UK, 3 students from USA, it is best that I communicate my insights using visuals like this chart, because a lot of studies has been done, like I said, and it has been realized that this paints a better picture than this. So after analyzing your data, you need to visualize this data to communicate it to your stakeholders. And this is an example of visualizing your data, creating a chart. So this is more understandable than this. If I show this to my stakeholders, they can tell that we have way more students, almost 3 times the number of students we have in Nigeria and also in UK, in the US, because most times you'll be presenting to a non-technical audience and you need to paint a picture, and charts are the best way to paint pictures. So the data analysis process involves gathering your data. After you've gathered your data, you have to clean it in a way that you remove all the inconsistencies, incorrect values, incomplete values. And then after you've cleaned it, you can proceed to analyzing it. Then you visualize this insight so that you present it to your stakeholders. So this is the entire scope of data analytics. Thank you.